Thomas, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining. Before we really dive directly in, for the ones who don't know Thomas, just a little introduction to know who you're dealing with and what to expect from that session. So Thomas started his professional career at Daimler in 1972, where he quickly found his profession to think about personal development and distribute it through the organization. Over several other career stops and C-level positions, he was operational board member at Lufthansa Airline, member of the board at Continental, and last but not least, serving at the board of directors of the Deutsche Telekom, responsible for everything HR related, right? So Personalvorstand. It's fair to say that he was one of the most driven managers over decades. His aktiver Unruhezustand led him into politics. With the FDP, he got voted into the German Bundestag, always focusing on research, development, and innovation, and ended his political career in the function of Parlamentarischer Staatssekretär bei der Bundesministerin for Education and Research. I could actually go on and on and on what you actually all did in your life. I have to stop now that we actually going to dive into something, into our discussion. But there's one little thing that I want to highlight, what you say on your website, that one of your special powers is not keeping your mouth shut in general. And I would say we will all follow this lead, and you can already prepare some questions for after the session, so feel engaged to speak up. Before we dive into can Germany take the innovation leap, I think what we will more change into how, or if ever possible. There's a little elephant in the room in terms of, I think it's public information that you will end your political career or drop out of politics. And may I ask why, after such a steep career?
Well, after 5 years of politics, I experienced in February a very steep disruption in my personal life. Not only my mother, 97 years old, was challenging me to take care, but also my partner, who is severely sick. And naturally, like always in politics, there came a concrete moment where I really got where I was attacked on my integrity. And like always in my professional life, I then take very harsh action. I'm leaving the field if I cannot change it. And I was attacked so severely, and there was no change possible, so I decided to put down the job as Secretary of State, but also the job as a member of parliament. Very simple.
Straightforward, I'd say. And all the best for your beloved ones on that stage. So let's dig and start. So let's start soft. And how far away are we to take innovation lead? And what's the status quo from your perspective? Are we any close to have any lead in innovation?
Well, there is an expert commission called Expert Commission on Research and Innovation, EFI. And this is the advocatus diaboli, so to say, for government. And they just pointed out that we are, in terms of deep tech startups, on a historically low level with a little moving up since 2020, but historically deep, that we have in relevant patent fields lost the place in the top 3 in the world, that the export of deep tech and high-tech goods are structurally decreasing, and unfortunately also that German Mittelstand, the small and medium-sized companies, since 2002 have a structural decline in investing in research and development. So it comes to the point that a lot of small and medium-sized companies don't have enough product innovation. We are still very good in process innovations, efficiency innovations, but not really in new business models and so on. So, well, you are all here and you are devoted probably to innovation and to founding enterprises, and I'm very happy to be here, but unfortunately you are not scaling enough. And there are probably different reasons for that, but thanks God we have you.
Agree on that. And so, you know, if you already mentioned not scaling fast enough or big enough, what do you see are the major roadblockers? Are we, you know, are the people moving out who could be the inventors? Is it structural problems? Are we just saturated and just feel that we are so much upfront that we don't invent or innovate fast enough? What's your take?
Well, you said I should not shut up my mouth.
Definitely not.
Number one, I rarely, well, politicians don't make technology, but they should set the technological and innovation frameworks and the political conditions so that it can happen. But I have not seen so many strategically incompetent politicians like in the last 5 years. To be very clear-cut. Because those people are taking the decision for the overall framework and their contribution to Europe on the one hand, but on the other hand, you can see on the issue of stock options for startups, the discussion going on, which is incompetent. So, but on a strategic level, that is a real problem. I had my very clear views on what is the technology and innovation strategy, and probably in terms of getting it on the paper, we were 40–50% till May. I just hope it can be finished that way. A second point, which I see, and I have a corporate history of 40 years. But I secondly see the complacency of big corporations to adapt fast enough to the changing environment. In cooperating with startups, in utilizing innovation inputs whatsoever. And that is a key issue. And number three, let me put it frankly, 90% of the supported startups make an exit outside Germany. So yep. Those are, from my point, 3 stumbling roadblocks.
Yeah. I think you touched on ESOP or Mitarbeiterbeteiligungsprogramme, and it's so funny that right now the SPD is in the regierende Partei, and I was at Uber and I had shares, and that made my
Lindner as well.
And Christian. So the thing is, it should be actually a completely sozialdemokratischer move to understand that every worker is shareholder of the company. So I hardly understand why they're not picking it up.
Well, even without startups, Mitarbeiterbeteiligungsmodelle, monetary participation models in traditional established small and medium-sized enterprises are always, probably, I first was confronted with that in the early 90s. And it never bloomed up. It never blossomed, really. It is like it is.
Yeah, fair enough. So, we talked a bit on what's not ideal. So, shedding some light on what kind of ecosystem or infrastructure is necessary today to assure that we are fast, innovative, and can translate it actually into economic wealth. We heard that the big ones are not actually changing fast enough. So is it more a let's do it without them and just try to disrupt them and make them disappear?
Well, no. Naturally, the transformation of the established industries is a key challenge, and also of medium-sized companies. And we have 1,700 hidden champions, which are in old industries, and which need to develop new business models. Some of them do. So this transformation of the established industries and businesses is a key challenge from a social aspect, naturally for employment, but also for the profitability of the country. But the second part is really the startup move. And when I'm being asked, what can politics do? I usually tend to say, keep its hand off. Well, that is a bloody unfair answer. I know that. But in really give the freedom for entrepreneurship. And understand that entrepreneurship is a key in schools, in universities, in transformation of established ones, but also in the growing of new companies and new industries. And now let's come more concrete. I was fascinated to see that, for example, in Great Britain, 2010, university free enterprise zones have been established around Manchester University, around Cambridge, around Oxford. 10 in the meantime. Now that is, and they exploited the European regulation till to the extreme. On the one side, deep tech research, easy transfer ways out of universities, easy IP rules, transfer rules. On the other side, incentives for industry partners to co-locate in the enterprise zone, easy rent for commercial but also for private issues. And France has it in Sofia and Antipolis in the tech park as well, since 30 years. So really, I'm since years, I think from a more macro perspective about this free enterprise zones. Not like Shenzhen, which developed from a workbench into a deep tech hotspot, but really as a round deep tech. You could take the maritime technologies in Kiel or Rostock, or you can take the quantum technologies in Jülich or in Munich. That you really have deep tech nuclei, and that you are really able to create a regulatory environment, not just places where you meet and greet, but a regulatory environment which is attractive. Now that is one key issue. Actually, I'm not out of business in the moment. I'm still. Otherwise, I wouldn't sit here. Now, naturally, this is fully on my agenda. We need deep tech enterprise zones in this country. How many? 8 to 10. At least for the beginning. Secondly, what's an interesting point? I have been very long with CDTM in Munich and with Unternehmertum. I know them both. Unternehmertum, I know the predecessor of Unternehmertum from 1994, where I was in a board of a little consulting company of students, which developed out into Unternehmertum. Now Unternehmertum is the great reset. the top-down great reset of transfer. Now, CDTM is the grassroots network. And it's interesting really to see that obviously both approaches work. And then we talk on the one hand about public-private partnership in building startup factories in some leading universities, which are really transfer-minded on the one hand, but on the second, to really create the freedom for those grassroots to develop and grow.
Yeah.
So those probably are and this, it's a kind of a portfolio. Now I'm talking about 3 different paths which I see, and then naturally very traditional, professionalize the technology transfer functions of universities. Only 24% of all founders are utilizing their advice because they are not appreciated. And they are often a stumble block when it comes. I even had it at Technical University in Munich, where I had some weeks ago a talk with 15 spin-offs founders, and where we really got to the bloody point where are the stumbling blocks locally. So that has to do with professionalization of technology transfer in universities. So those are some really things to tackle, strategically, but also locally.
When we had our pre-talks and for that discussion, you mentioned one nice anecdote from Howard Hughes, the aerospace pioneer, that his hunger has been so big that they created their own weather.
Yeah.
So do you think that ecosystems, biotopes, however you want to call it, need that and that you can replicate? Or do you think you just have to make it big enough to let's see what happens?
He didn't say he visited me at the Starnberg Lake and we had something to drink.
That's true.
So, but
I can still remember.
When I was working for Lufthansa in the 90s, I read an article about this pioneer, Howard Hughes, and he built huge aircrafts, and he built huge hangars which developed their own climate. And that was the idea when I created the Lufthansa School of Business. And where we did not have 20 people together, but 300, 400, 500 in huge scale, large scale action, research, and implementation activities. It was in the industrial age a transformation engine. It was not a biotop. Yeah, it was a little bit also a biotop. Yeah. But naturally, if I think about nowadays, and when I talk about that, I'm happy that you sit here, but I would love to have 10 times more, 100 times more. Add zeros and zeros. We have to add to that. Then I very often think, how can you instill academic institutions and building a huge hangar for all those talents who want to change the world? And that has deep, also in Fraunhofer and Max Planck, 100,000 scientists, ladies and men working there, doing good stuff in their silos, bad leadership. In universities, in the silos, bad university leadership, if at all. Perhaps efficiency management. So, but we have to, for this science entrepreneurship, we have somehow, and that is one of my dreams I have for the years to come. I would love to create this, what is it, movements for It's not a conference, it's a movement for. So Howard Hughes in the 21st century. So, but that is, yeah, we need that. Because at the, another little story. I was, for some time, I was the kind of the chairman of the makerspace of the Unternehmertum. And we had been sending 2 students to Georgia Tech and then to Stanford to really see their makerspaces. But what they came back and talked first about their Vorlesungen where they built bridges. And they had materials, they had mass Vorlesungen, mass lectures,
yep.
but interactive.
So actually fun.
So that was their first. That was their first feedback, which they gave us before they then talked about the makerspace at Georgia Tech. Now, and this is climate, this is culture, this is style. And we need to create that.
I'm jumping on one question and probably going to come back to one that really is on my mind, but we also talked a bit about education per se, not only university education, but I have 2 little kids, and if I imagine that they will have to learn the same stuff and the same kind of way than I did in elementary school and high school and university, then we are doomed, because it was boring. It was designed to be an employee, and it was designed to be, fit in. Do you think that there is a way how you can utilize the ecosystem we have, like elite universities, like schools, but teach something else? What has to happen, or what has to be learned or taught?
I might be harsh, but the school system is a failed system.
Agree on that?
So the interesting point is, can you repair failed systems? And I have seen over 40 years hundreds of experiments and passionate teachers and who wanted to change school system. Probably, from my point of view, I would not work in the system. I would build 10,000 makerspaces at schools. And 10,000 multiplied by 10,000 is 100 million. So that is overall not the big money in this country.
So that means 10,000, with 10,000 euros you can build one makerspace.
Yeah, I have been testing that in many schools, roughly a dozen, where I have been, where I talked with the teachers and with the students, and I said, what was your calculation? How did you start? Well, naturally, they evolved at the end, but you can make a good starting ramp with 10,000 euro. So, not working in the system, but at the periphery of the system. That would be one thing, and my second, when it comes to educational policies and it's talking about a failed system, I would increase and make fair conditions for not state-led schools. And I would give them the same money as public schools, but would connect that with the issue that they don't ask for additional money from the parents of their students. Because my deep belief is, and we have now 12% Catholic, Presbyterian, Montessori, Waldorf, strong schools, democratic schools, whatsoever. If we increase that number to 25%, just double it, you have a quality competition in the school system. So those would be kind of, well, on the one, the 10,000 makerspaces would be like transformation of small and medium-sized companies. So it's trying at the periphery to change, to create a different climate, like an innovation lab.
Yep.
And the other thing is really make a sharp cut in terms of financing of private schools. Not private elite schools, private schools with a new pedagogical and didactical approach. And with the freedom to act. Actually, there are some efforts in some of our Bundesländer to make Schulfreiheitsgesetze, more autonomy about budgets and recruiting of teachers. And I'm not so sure about that. But those are the two things. Now, and when it comes to universities, well, WHU has been the engine for e-commerce companies, which was relevant at the beginning, but now they became isomorph. Yeah, well, more and more e-commerce does not really
solve the problem.
So interesting would be, can Wissenschaftliche Hochschule für Unternehmensführung, WHU, could they also go in deep tech whatsoever? So, yes, they have a significant amount of startups. They are the best performing university in Germany by far, but they are all the same, e-commerce. So, does that solve? No, I deeply believe in the power of our TUs, but also in the power of Technischen Hochschulen, which really, at the end, we have excellent research overall. And the European paradox stated by the European Commission in 1995 was, we are good in research and miserable in putting things on the street. So we have the infrastructure, and we have the brain, and we have the hearts. So what's needed is what we talked before.
Yeah. So you would say, when we come back to the question how to take the innovation lead in the world, and we agreed on not taking it to that very boring question, where do we stand in comparison to China and to the US and all that?
Well, more Switzerland or Denmark would be already good enough. Those rank usually amongst the top 5 in every international innovation ranking. And we are from 9 to 19.
Yeah.
Oh. So we just need to look at Denmark, and we need to look at Switzerland.
Is it the laziness or the old structures of incumbents or facilities like Max Planck and your best friends von Fraunhofer? Is it?
I mean, my best friends from Max Planck.
I mean, the point is, you just said we are pretty good in innovation per se, but we're not getting it. We're not getting it on the street. We don't create economic wealth out of it. What has to change if we just go on these structures that we could be on the forefront?
Well, it's like with old Daimler or old Bosch. Those institutions need to transform. And I talked with President Stratmann from Max Planck many times. What is the transformation issue of Max Planck? You know, transfer is not just adding a third mission besides research and teaching. Transfer means the whole system is in transformation. Now, probably Vatican in Rome and universities in Germany are very similar. But for me, it's very simple. If we do not also develop strategies for reforming our academic institutions, we will not develop significantly more outcome impact. And now take the Unternehmertum. It was a long time an unloved child. And now it's coming into technical university, and the CEO of Unternehmertum is vice president for research. But there are many parts of the TUM which are not reformed at all. I have been sitting together with 15 spin-offs of the TUM, and we talked about the daily problems they suffer. And we talked about what it means to negotiate 15-month intellectual property transfer. Then the business model is dead, and the motivation is out. So we need not just, we need also to rethink how our universities and how our Max Plancks are designed. And naturally, what's perhaps happening in Nuremberg, experimenting with new structures, with more democratic structures and less hierarchy in universities, is a key issue. Because if you create at the beginning a biotop for more freedom and more autonomy, you have a significantly better output at the end. And usually this is a blind spot. We do not talk about university reform anymore. But we expect from universities that out of this fucking old body, more startups develop.
These fucking old buddies. Yeah, I 100% agree. So, what drives me to a point, you know, I mean, having a perspective and thinking of what goes wrong and challenge it and naming and calling it out. If in an ideal world there would be 3 call to actions or 3 changes that will be executed, where would you start?
Well, I would start with a very unconventional topic. Precaution for getting older. So we talk really about die staatliche Rentenversicherung. And we talked about that at the beginning. And if it's right, what the Startup Association tells us, that from 1 million employees in startups, we could easily increase to 4 million. We need to develop a solid stock option program, because that is the valid way for entrepreneurial partners and entrepreneurs to take care about the future.
Yep.
Secondly, let's say for the small and medium-sized enterprises, where 85% of all German employees are employed, naturally a tax favorable employee participation program, and for the state-based pension system, increase significantly the amount which comes from money out of stocks, of shares. That's the only overall gaining value over the last 50, 60 years. So in the moment, the taxpayer is financing an extreme amount of the state-owned pension system. So we need to restructure that. Those would be taking care about getting old in 3 pillars. Number two, I said already, 10,000 makerspaces at German schools. And number three, a very easy thing, a transfer policy, virtual shares for intellectual property, which is most suitable for deep tech startups.
Yep. Sounds like a good call to action. Before we hopefully dive in, or not hopefully, I just looked on the clock and we're nearly at the end, and we're just going to be very German, very sharp.
Yeah. You mean not very American and very broad?
There's one anecdote for everybody who's wondering how these Mitarbeiterbeteiligungsprogramme can turn out and what that means for an ecosystem. So just as an example, when Google back then IPO'd, they had on the IPO 1,400 new millionaires and 11 new billionaires. And what did they do? They took that money, brought it back to their schools, their universities, to their friends, to the people they know. And it was just Google. So if you think of not as how it is in the press in Germany a lot, a way how to pay your employees less and just give them as a carrot that Mitarbeiterbeteiligungsprogramm, that's not the case. Because when it turns out to work and a company really succeeds, you will create a lot of wealth with people with the right mindset, with the right contacts, who bring that back into the ecosystem. That's how the flywheel starts. Yeah. So that's just as a, whoever needs an argument.
ESOP for startups is crucial for the new economy.
Yeah.
But I would, let me, also, we talked a lot about the very concrete stuff, but what is my personal vision for Germany? We have a strongly developed industry in chemical products, in machinery, equipment, automotive supplier, and automobiles. We need to develop a second generation of deep tech hidden champions, plus zeros, don't do it, a deep tech Mittelstand. And for me, a beautiful example, Sunfire in terms of climate tech, BioNTech in Mainz, Celonis in IoT and artificial intelligence, and ESA Aerospace in space. They could be the prototypes of this next phase of German deep tech Mittelstand. And naturally, happily, if them grow and develop to multi-billion companies, how beautiful.
Oh yeah.
But in the overall, as a society model, probably we are a very specialist country. Probably as a society model is this deep tech Mittelstand not so bad. And that and given the aggression war in the Ukraine and everything and having increasingly a Cold War 2.0, we don't want to be the workbench for the US. So we need to develop that. It's also an issue of our own value systems.
So it sounds a bit like, even though you drop out of politics, you're going to just go into your next aktiven Unruhestand 2.0. So what will be your next steps? You already have ideas, or you're just going to rest a bit? No.
I'm working on this Howard Hughes case.
All right.
That is, it's not qualifying. It's not coaching startups. It's inspiring talent.
I like
That's
that.
a different piece. That is having an own climate, because at the end, not every, but most human beings are capable and gifted. So they are either siloed by structures or siloed in their own brain. And inspiring means breaking out. Breaking out of your own prison or breaking out of the prison which is being established for you. And that is something I'm really working on, because I was not so unsuccessful in old business in that transformational issues. So that is something I really think about. I talk with Falling Walls founders in Berlin. I talk with junior management science, more in the economic field. I have to get the puzzle together. Yeah, that is.
So I'm very much looking forward to see you puzzling and what comes out of it. And thank you so much again that you here are with us on stage and shared your insights on your views. And I think it's pretty much 3 minutes left for questions. Thank you so much.
So I have the microphone. Are there questions from the audience, or is everything clear? What?
Back there.
Yeah, Joachim Schulze from the DZNI in Bonn. It's a Helmholtz Institute. We missed Helmholtz completely. And I think your criticism on Max Planck is not right. I mean, Max Planck is basic research. And we have Fraunhofer, we have Helmholtz, we have Leibniz, we have the universities. Not everybody should do translation and transformation. I think that if you want to cut down basic science, then you have to tell them to have less of these institutes. But I think you should, I'm not a Max Planck person myself. I'm usually not defending them, but I here would like to defend them, because if we don't like to do that in Germany, then we have to question the concept Max Planck. Otherwise, I think they should stay with basic science. And that's what I would like to mention and ask what you think.
Well, then I did a wrong job with convincing President Stratmann to go more in transfer, because he decided to do that. Because there is no reasoning in the world why basic research should not in any way have entrepreneurial effects. So, and Stratmann, thanks God, in his last year as Max Planck president, will tackle that. So you are talking to the wrong person.
Okay, we agree to disagree on this topic. There was actually a nice comment yesterday, I think, on this Caltech model, which was set up, in the US university to produce Nobel Prize winners. And then at some point, 15 years ago, the director or president decided to also have, as a measure, entrepreneurial successes. And all of a sudden, a lot changed in this very research-oriented organization. And I mean, I don't want to defend and build a bridge, but
beautiful. You need to be perfect in your approaches. That is a shoe in the door, like a easy pragmatic IP transfer rule. And having, if there are new professors being called in and they present themselves, if the issue of have you been a founder has the same relevance as publications in A+ journals, then we would be at Caltech.
Maybe, yeah. Further questions? Otherwise, I go with one. I think all of these things in the educational system and so on that could be done, needs to be done, seems to me, I mean, the system seems to me so rigid, and I don't believe we will change anything there. But to be very, very simple and pragmatic here, I think what we already see, that we have new clusters, deep tech clusters forming, and there are companies, even ecosystems, this new space thing around ESA Aerospace, satellite companies. It's just one example where there is clearly visible that something new and very powerful is here, and the economic value even is visible. But there is really zero support almost zero support, I must say, for these kind of ecosystems. And I think if we want to nurture these kind of things, we need to be very concrete in what we want to do, like new space, or maybe on the like semiconductor side. So there are many deep tech verticals where we are incredibly strong. But I think it's not concrete enough, and we do not concentrate enough the resources, public and private, on these clusters. So are there any ideas of how to deal with that problem or approaches?
Well, I put in the coalition agreement the formation of free enterprise zones according to the British prototypes. So it is already written down. And that is not the solution, but it's one pragmatic step to do that. No, and I talked with the president of Helmholtz, naturally, already since I was in the opposition. We talked about what could be locations. And naturally, we talk about the geosystems in Potsdam. You talk about the maritime technologies in Lübeck and Kiel and Rostock. You talk about über KI, not im Deutschen Forschungszentrum für künstliche Intelligenz, but in Tübingen, in Cyber Valley. So this is on the table, on the political agenda. It's not, I made my dream true. I wrote my first article on free enterprise zones 2015 in Wirtschaftswoche. And I made my way through, and it's now in the coalition agreement. Bad luck, I can't really execute it.
Let's hope and pray for that. Thank you very much for this conversation. And I think we now switch to the next program point. And in the meantime, feel free to, again, take some drinks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.